Hello, I am Lincoln Easley, and I'm in class FTT 221, and today we're talking about optics and sights. And there's a number of different sights that were used in history. Historically, sights, when they were used in black powder cannons, a lot of it was just point and shoot and hope you hit what you're hitting. And in the last 200, 300 years, we've came a long ways from sights, even from the standard sights. The first one I'd like to bring up is this was a 45 revolver. So we're going to do the standard check, make sure it's unloaded. So these sights here, the way they would work is you would pretty much aim down the sights, and you would have you match them all up, and you'd be able to shoot at what you're hitting depending on how many yards you're trying to shoot at, and you'd angle the gun depending on where you're trying to shoot. So because you cannot adjust these, the way they used to adjust these is you would take a file and you would cut a groove into your sight, so that way you'd be able to know exactly how many yards you're shooting for what you're shooting. I don't do that with mine because I kind of want to keep the original look, the original feel. So for the 1911, we'll do the same thing. Deposit magazine, check, make sure it's not loaded. If you notice that they have adjustable sights, so you can actually adjust your sights. So when Brownie came up with this firearm, and this gun goes all the way back to World War I, so they've used this from World War I even to current days, and this is a phenomenal firearm. I love shooting it. It's a lot of fun to shoot. Super accurate. I mean, but the sights, you actually match up your sight pictures. As you can tell, they're far different from the revolver sights. So you can look at the revolver sights versus the 1911 sights. So you could actually adjust these sights. If you wanted to go back and forth, you can adjust these here. You can go up and down, so that way you'd be able to adjust your sights based on where you're shooting instead of having to follow your sights. Now, the next one I'd like to bring up is one of my favorite rifles. This is the lever action Henry 45 rifle. These are very hard to get in California, almost impossible to get. I had to order this one and have it shipped from Louisiana all the way over here. And I can't ask for a better rifle. I mean, I got this for a really good deal. It's $900 when I bought it. So they usually sell for $1,500 to $2,000 California. So I got quite a steal on this one. So if you look real closely for rifle sights, they have an adjustable sight. So this is like an old style adjusting. So you can actually adjust your sights depending on how many yards you want to shoot. So you can figure out where your sight picture is based on how many yards you're shooting. So very good, very fun rifle to shoot. Now, another one I brought in was a Model 12. A lot of the shotguns follow the same aspect, but generally in these cases, you have a little BB on the end for doing it. I'm going to go and check, make sure it's unloaded. As you tell, it's unloaded. So right here, there's a little BB, and the way this would work is you would actually point, and it's hard to describe. You have to go out and shoot in order to do it. But you want to aim just barely above your target, and then it will actually hit what you're trying to shoot at. And I found that's what worked best for me, and that's how I've been shooting for years, even with a double barrel shotgun. And then this is my 30-06. So 30-06, I actually have a set of optic sights on here. So these are for the scopes. So when I'm going over and shooting and going hunting, this is where I'm actually making long range shots. So as you can tell, it's unloaded, and there's a shell case inside, obviously, but I did check, make sure it's all loaded. So it's all good to go. And I can make 100 to 500 yard shots with this. So it's actually a fairly good scope, not high quality, but I'm not going to complain. It does the job I want it to do. And last but not least, I have my AR-15. So you have your choice of iron sights. So the iron sights, these are very accurate up to 100 yards. I cannot go wrong with these. I like these a lot. They're a lot of fun to shoot. They're I really enjoy them. The next set of sights that I have, so I have up to 3 different sights on here that I can use of my choice when I'm going shooting. So I have my red dot optics, and this is pretty awesome to use. It actually puts a red dot right in the target where you're going to shoot. The military uses these, competitive shooters use these. That's what I use it for, is competitive shooting. And then last is the laser sight, where I could actually create a laser beam. And if you look right behind me, you'll see a laser beam right behind me. And that's your laser, and wherever that laser is where you're going to be shooting. And that allows me to have to do speed shootings. So the laser works really well if I want to like do speed shooting and get through the shooting course really quickly. So there's a number of different sights that are used in the history. So from World War II even to current, there's a number of sights that are used. From fixed sights, you have optics, you have telescopic lens sights, you have fixed sights, you have adjustable sights. So you have a lot of different sights for what you're using. The military uses sights with night vision. Apparently I am unable to get access to night vision in California because they're illegal in California. But you can get binoculars with night vision, which are completely legal to get. So there are sights that are illegal. There are also sights that I've seen that are actually illegal to hunt with, I believe in the United States, where you actually have a scope that will use a radar that will actually show you where to put will actually put your red dot and calculate the windage and the speeds and all that stuff so you can make your shot. When it comes to shooting and using the sights, generally you're dealing with three major elements other than the firearm itself, the sights, and the ammunition, the ballistics. The three elements you're dealing with is you're dealing with windage. Windage is a very big deal. Windage is what controls everything out there. So when you have wind blowing, it will actually control when you're trying to shoot. So you may have to adjust your sights for the wind. The other thing you're gonna have to deal with is gravity. I don't care if you're 5 yards, 1,000 yards, 2,000 yards, 100 yards, it doesn't matter how many yards you are. Gravity will always pull the bullet down no matter what. I don't care how heavy the bullet is. And that's where you're trying to have a bullet that's designed when you're doing reloading, or if you go to buy it from a factory, doesn't matter, whichever one you prefer. You want a bullet that can cut into the wind, and as you're shooting, the bullet's going to gradually go down. So that's where your sights are going to go over. You're going to raise your sights up to hit the target for your trajectory of where you're hitting. And then the next one is velocity. So velocity is where you're shooting from one point to another, and then you're using your sight picture to figure out, so that way when you're going to aim up, you're going to actually shoot at a curve, which is your velocity, which is going to bring it down. So this is where velocity, gravity, and the windage is all going to play a big role to your trajectory of your target. So understanding the math and science of shooting will really help you a lot for understanding your sight pictures, how much wind. A lot of times you may have a GPS that can actually tell you how fast the winds are blowing for where you're shooting. And all this is a big role for what you're trying to do. And people have been working with this for years, trying to perfect this. And like I said, it doesn't matter how many yards you are. And yes, obviously if you're 5-10 yards, you probably would pay attention a little bit less to the windage, and you pay a little bit less attention to the velocity and the accuracy, because you're pretty accurate. In fact, fast draw artists would actually draw from their hip, and they wouldn't even look down their sights. They would just point and shoot, which is a very unique way of shooting. And it's not really something that's been done in the Old West. In fact, it's theorized it's only been happened one time, and that was with Wild Bill Hickok. There's only one time that's ever happened that's been recorded, but there is no other time it's ever been done. So it is a myth of people squaring off and shooting that way. It never happened. It's only happened one time in history, as far as I know. But don't quote me on that. It's just from what I've read up on and looked in the history of the Old West. Otherwise, a lot of these sights were used for a lot of different things. I mean, some were designed, I have sights here that were designed like in fact, the lever action was the gun that won the West. This was the gun that soldiers preferred. In fact, back in the day, this was far more valuable of a weapon. A good example is a musket would go for $10, where this would go for $50. It was a far more valuable weapon. I mean, every cowboy had to have it. Every outlaw had to have it. I mean, everybody had to have this particular weapon because it was far more valuable. It could hold 10 plus rounds, where a musket could only hold 1 round, and you had to reload. It takes 1 to 2 minutes to reload. In fact, I think it's one of the best rifles. This weapon was used during World War I and World War II as the Model 12. It's a heavy-duty shotgun. It's very durable. It handles really well. The bolt-action rifle, this was used from World War I all the way to current. The bolt-actions were actually the best rifles for trench warfare, and surprisingly, they even call them trench guns. So they either used one of two types of bolt-action. They had a pullback, and they had the bolt-action. So that's where you would actually, the pullback is where you had a little ring, you'd pull it back, and you'd pop it forward. And the reason is these wouldn't jam as bad, where versus an AR-15, if you try using an AR-15 in war, you're talking about a sports car or firearms, and you would have to constantly clean that firearm and keep it lubricated because it will jam up on you. I mean, it's a fancy, super sweet firearm that's a lot of fun to shoot, but it will have its issues if you have a really bad and dirty environment, and you would have to constantly keep it clean and keep it updated. Not saying it can't be done, but generally this is more of a civilian rifle, and from what I've read up on, these rifles have never been in warfare. But besides that point, for the sights that are used, these sights are used from the military to civilian use to competition use for hunting. So there's a number of different sights and a number of different reasons why these sights were used in the history of firearms. So thank you very much, and here's a brief description of what I have and what is being used. A lot of these sights in World War II, they've actually started off with just iron sights during World War II, where they didn't really use a lot of scopes. They used closed sights later on, which I have no firearms that have those, but that would actually allow it to, when you're shooting, to have a little cup around it, so when you go to aim, you would actually be able to see your target a lot easier, and it was a little bit different. They also have Cowboy Guns, where they actually had a sight picture that would raise up, and you'd actually be able to adjust it to the windage and everything, and you'd be able to make your shot. So these are a few things about the history of the sights, about the Cowboy Guns, about the Model 12, and the 1911, the AR-15, the bolt action, lever action. A lot of them have different types of sights and different purposes for those sights and what's being used for. So thank you very much, and have a great day.